Hi everyone, welcome to this tutorial. In this video, we are going to be learning everything you need to know about getting started with Spring Boot. So we'll be covering quite a number of interesting technologies. So for example, we'll be developing a typical REST API application. So that has some, association like the relationship between one entity has multiple entities, like post has multiple comments, and then we'll be looking at the fetching strategies, deletion and saving strategies. So we'll be using database for storing data. We'll be using Spring Boot 4. So even though we are not going to be like using extensive features of Spring Boot 4 and Java 25, but we will see if there are new changes. And then definitely we are going to be learning Hibernate JPA. So JPA is a specification. Hibernate is implemented under the hood. And I'll also show you some transaction and propagation strategies. These are important topics, specifically for production application. And then at the end, we'll be writing the unit and Mockito test cases for a couple of our services and controllers. And then I will also show you how to implement caching with Spring Boot. So default caching, if you want to avoid hitting your database frequently, how can we configure caching? And then flyway database migration. So it is basically for migrating database schemas or tables. I'll show you how to do that specifically for production setting. It's going to be extremely useful for you. And then some asynchronous. So we'll be mimicking some of the features, even though it's not going to be like a perfect application for demonstrating, but I will show you a lot of these concepts. All right, so without any further ado, let's go ahead and create application, and I will show you what exactly we're going to be building. So we're going to be building some scenario, like let's say in Facebook or some social media application, you have a post and that it has multiple comments, right? So we're going to be taking that feature and then implementing this in this application, right? Of course, we're not going to be like concerning about too much of the production thing, so we will not be implementing maybe pagination or something like that, but we will cover everything that you need to know, right? So you can start working on that, leveraging and learning further concepts. All right, so without any further ado, let's go and head over to starterspring.io. And then here, so what you can do is come the tutorial for a group and just choose Java as a language, Maven is a project, and the for Spring Boot you can go with 4.0.2 because this is the snapshot. So never go with snapshot, and this is the audio version. So I recommend you do choosing this. And if you are watching later, just choose the latest one. It should probably work. And project metadata for com.tutorial, that's fine, and artifact tutorial, name tutorial, that's fine, and then description. So tutorial. Okay, so I'll be maybe tutorial.example.com. All right. And then for packaging, I'll be using ZAR. So here two configuration settings. So by default, YAML is selected, but if you want to go with properties, that's fine. But I'll be sticking with YAML. It is more readable and easy to maintain. But properties is also fine. And then for Java you can go with 25. If you don't have 25, you don't even need to install. You can always choose the settings in, or you can directly download from IntelliJ IDEA itself. And then for dependencies, so just choose web. This web I have already added, and then just choose Lombok. So Lombok is for reducing some boilerplate codes. And then I have already added Postgres, so just choose Postgres and then JPA. And then Hibernate is by default included. So if you go here, it is by default included, and I've already included Spring Data JPA. And for flyware, so I will be using flyware later, so we will add that dependency later. All right, so I'm just going to generate this and then open in my IDE. So I'll be using IntelliJ Ultimate, but if you are using IntelliJ community version, that's perfectly fine. No need to go for Ultimate or other IDE. So I recommend you stick with IntelliJ. as it is one of the best IDEs specifically for Java and Spring Boot. All right, everyone. So I just imported this project into my IntelliJ IDEA, and if you go here, you can see all the code generated for you. This was generated for us, and then you can explore dependencies, right? So we have added the required dependencies. So let me go ahead and run this application, and I will show you why these fail. So even if you know, I'll explain. So it might be useful for people who don't know. So I'm expecting this application to fail, and then let's read this error message. So it is extremely important to debug properly. So it says the application failed to start, and then failed to configure data source. URL attribute is not specified, and no embedded data source could be configured, right? So the error message is clear. If you don't understand, you can go ahead and read this as well, right? So this is basically saying that because we have added dependency for Postgres, which is our database, but the application tried to connect to that database but couldn't find the URL for that database, right? So this is why it is being unable to create a connection to the database, right? So to avoid that, so what we have to do is we have to add URL and or database configuration so that it can find the database for us and can connect to. All right. So for that, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna Spring Boot YouTube and then tutorial, and then for connecting to database, we have to go for data source and then URL. So for URL, so okay, you don't need to remember these things, right? You can just copy from the internet. You can go here and then I'll paste from one of my existing projects. So basically it is JDBC Postgres localhost and then the name of the database. So I'm going to be saying YT and then Spring Boot. Okay, so just YouTube Spring Boot. And then for username Postgres. So it depends what's the username of your database that you have installed. And then for password, I'm also writing Postgres, right? So this is the username and password for my database, right? But if you are using database other than PostgreSQL, right, you can always just change these, and username and password, everything will remain same. So you don't need to write a lot of code changes for this, right? So basically you need to add here, for example, if you are using MySQL, you have to add MySQL, not Postgres, and then just change connection strings here. So you can just Google that and you will find plenty of information. All right, so now if I go and for example, we can also give driver class name arg dot can I okay PostgreSQL dot driver, right? And then if I run this application, okay, let's see. All right, okay, so because we haven't yet created this database, so yes, unable to determine dialect, please say it. All right, so I understand that, and let's go for PSQL. So I'm using PSQL, it's a command line terminal. So I'll just go here, right? And then password is Postgres. And then I'm just going to create database and then YTSB. And then if I connect to YTSB, I'm now connected to this database, right? So if you're using other database, just use that. If you're using Postgres and don't know PSQL commands, you can go for PC admin, right? This is like a graphical user interface tool, so this is user friendly, right? And specifically you want to visualize well, this one is the one you have to go, or this one is pretty good for connecting, quick connection and quick selection, etc. But for now onwards, I'll actually be using this database. So since I'm using IntelliJ Ultimate, I have access to database. So if you are using community person, unfortunately you don't have access to that. I'll be connecting from here, right? But if you are not using, don't worry. So just query your database, see your database the way you can. So if you are using IntelliJ Ultimate, you can always connect from here. So I'm going to datasets and Postgres, and then I'm going to write the username and password, and then YTSP, and then it gives you this connection, right? So you can just copy this, right? So and then paste it in the actual application.yaml file, right? So look at this, now it's connected, and there we go. So basically I have actually connected to the database that I created, and if I run this application, it should now be running soon. All right, so now look at this. It started tutorial application in these seconds on port 8080. All right, so we have actually set up our application and successfully run. There are a couple of settings that I would like to configure before we actually jump and write the code, right? Since we have used JPA, so I'm gonna say some logging and then SQL formatting and display the SQL queries, because the JPAs actually will generate SQL queries under the hood for us. So if we want to see what kind of queries it is generating, so we can just see that information right on the console. All right, so I'm gonna be setting that. So basically I'll be copying from one of my existing projects instead of typing that. Um, Let me copy, and then here. All right, so this one actually updates, but for now I'll be doing create drop for a while, and then I will come back and change it to update, and then we'll be using flyway db migration later. All right, so it shows SQL queries in log, and then it is just for formatting SQL, and that's all. And I also want to actually set up some logging information. And here, logging, is it logging? Oh no, logging. Okay, logging, it's at the root level. And then logging label. All right. And hibernate, arc.hibernate.sql. And then, so should we go for debug? Okay, so this means that all the SQL will be set at the debug label, so any debug information will be printed. And then I want to go root, and then also let's say debug, right? So we will turn it off back to info if it clutters the console. All right, so that should be it for now. And if I run this application, we can see something there. So we can see, oh no, we got it. Okay, it's because of this root debug. So I'll go back to info, and then just because we are getting too many unnecessary logging information. All right, we started application, create drop. All right, so but we didn't see something like, so SQL, for example, here it should actually create drop. Let me show you if it has created. Okay, so yeah, because we don't have any SQL table, something like that here, so we will not see anything right there, right? So this is, now we have actually set up our application, and then we are actually ready to start writing our code. All right, guys, so let's now create a full structure. So I'll be using n layer architecture. That means we'll be like splitting across different layers, for example controller layers for REST controllers, and then we'll be using service, the repository, or DAO, data access object. And so we'll be splitting across different layers to make project easy to maintain, right? So in this package I'm going to be creating, and we'll be creating certain. So first one is model. So model is basically for mapping to database. Let's say I have a post table, and then I want post uh, post entity class, and then I have post table in the database I want to map it to, and then Hibernate will do, or JPA will do rest of the things for us. We just have to give configuration. And then for controller, so all right, so some people call it API, or REST controllers, or REST, whatever it is. So controller essentially means REST controller here, because we are building API. All right. And then for service, I'll be using service. And then maybe we need some DTO, like DTO for data transfer object. So we'll not be exposing our model or entity class directly. We'll be using some records or simple Java classes with certain field. And let's say other one, repository. So some people call it DAO because it talks to database data layer, but I will be calling it repository. So either way it's fine. All right, so this is the folder structure that we are going to maintain, and then we'll be writing controller classes inside of it, and so on. So, and this is actually easy to write and easy to maintain, and this is also widely followed in the industry if you are working with any MVC application. All right, then let's write some model classes. So like I said before, we're going to be creating post and comments, and then post will have many comments, and we'll be creating APIs around that scenario. So I'm going to be creating model class called post Java class. It's going to be Java class, and then post. Name of the post can be like, something post, but I'll be sticking with post. All right. And the idea here is the post will have certain attributes, right? What can we include in post? What can we include in this class? All right. So in this class, we can create certain attributes like maybe long, or I will go with private and then long ID. This is going to be post ID, and then private, and then a string title, and then it can also have private string and then content. Okay, so the post will have some description, right? Basically description. Okay, and also we can have private and then created, for example, instant, and then created at, or we can say created date, right? So these are the common fields. We can always include as many fields as we want, but to stick with fewer uh, fields, I'll be just going with these ones, but you can always add more if you want, right? In the real world application, probably it will have author, right, and such information, but I'll be like just sticking with this, and then we will have some list of comments here. So once we create comment class, we will include that here. All right. And for example, this created date, um, it is automatically going to be like the time it is saved to the database, right? So what I'm gonna do is public void created date, and then okay, no. All right, set preset pre preset, and then created date, and this dot created date equals instant dot now. All right, so this is going to be like before it is saved. So pre and then persist. All right, that means it is automatically going to be saved, right? Saved, and we cannot actually change it. Later I will set that setting. So this is basically saying, okay, so before you persist to the database, just, this date will be set as in standard now without us having to write some code for this. All right. This is good. But now, so what we are going to do is we have to actually map it to the database table, and that's where ZPA comes into picture. So what am I going to do here is I'm going to be mapping it to database um, table, so that the Hibernate and ZPA they create for us. Okay, so to do so, entity, and if I say this now, it is basically will be creating a table name called post with lowercase p, and then with these fields, right? And I can also customize the name, and then I can just say posts, right? Some people write the name of the table as plural, so I'll be sticking with that. And it's complaining that you haven't defined id, so the table will have id, so I will say id, and for that generated value, and then strategy strategy equals generation type dot identity. So that means it will be auto incremented and will be set for us, so we don't have to set the id of the post before we save. And if you want to configure the name of the table, sometimes, for example, created date as name equals, okay, and then post, and then created, and then date, okay, and then also updatable equals to false. So that means the no one will be able to update it, so it's usually useful for auditing purpose, right? So there are certain fields you don't want them to change specifically after updating. You can write this updatable is false, right? And this is actually pretty cool. And if I run this now, this will be mapped entity. All right, so I think it's not entity here. I can give table and then name. All right, sorry, here. So this should be good. Okay, and one more thing, since we have added Lombok, instead of writing manual getter and setters, we can just write getter annotation and then also setter. Okay, setter, and maybe two string as well. So this is basically will be generating getter and setters and the two string method for us. Okay, and let me create run this application, and we will see if this table with this name and these fields has been created or not. And if you also pay attention to this console, you will see some query getting executed. For example, look at this. It is creating some table, create table post with these fields, and we should see here, right? So that's the beauty of Hibernate. Okay, and I refreshed it, and we have one table called post, and there we go. And then look at this id. This is big integer auto increment because we set identity, and the post created date. All right, timestamp with zone, description, and then the title, right? And then we have one foreign, sorry, primary key, and then indexes. It's automatically created for us, which is unique, right? It's because of identity. All right, and then there are some other sequences, for example, and you can also create one sequence, but I'm not gonna do that right here. All right, so this is pretty nice, and let's create one more class called comment, and then we will see comment. Okay, comment, and then I'm also gonna map it to the database, and then table, and then name equals comments, and then also I'll be getter and then setter and then two string. I'm not sure if we will be using that or not, but again, so I'll be just copying and pasting these things here and right here. All right, so we have set id, and then what else it can have? Comment, right? So private, and then Of course, when you have a comment, you will have like who commented, when, something like that. But I'm just going to say comment and then text, and then private, and then instant, commented date, and what else we can have? Comment text, ID, commented date. That's fine. I mean, I'm just going to include minimal fields, but you can add as many fields as you want. And then I'll be just writing this one. Okay, and definitely it is going to be column, and then column name equals to commented date. So this is going to be default even if you don't include updatable false, right? So commented it because it is going to make this word uppercase, lowercase, and add underscore in between. That's the default strategy. All right, so updatable false, and then I'm just gonna say post this dot commented date equals instant dot now, and then preset commented date. Okay, commented date. All right, so now if I run this application one more time, we will see two tables being created for us. And if you pay closer attention to this console, you will see two more, actually total two queries getting executed, right? So comments and then post. This is pretty cool. And we have two tables, and then we have comments, and then this one right here. All right, so we have done pretty good here. But since I told you that post will have multiple comments, and then this comment actually will be associated with a post. It doesn't make sense to have comments without the post, right? So we are going to be linking, and that's where hibernate mappings actually comes into picture, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to post, and then here instead of list of comments, what I'm going to do is list of comment, and then comments equals new array list. So by default initially it is going to be empty, and then for us, since one post will have multiple comments, it is going to be one too many, right? And then one too many, and then there are certain strategies. For example, cascading, that means what happens to comments when we change post, or let's say when we delete a post, what happens to comments. In this case, it makes sense to delete comments when we delete post, right? Because comments without post doesn't make sense. But in some cases you might not want to do that, right? So cascade equals cascade type dot all. So what I'm saying here is, okay, so apply cascade type all, you will have more. So all means the combination of these, but if you just want to go for persist, so that means when you say post, just save comments. Persist means, but others will not be applied. But here all means everything will be applied, even deletion, removal, whatever. Okay, and right now, so if I run this application, I want to show you one thing. All right, it will create a join table for us, like maybe comments underscore post, or post underscore comments, let's see. And then if you go here and post comments, it has been created with some information from both the table post comments, and then it has two column ID, post ID, and comment ID. If this is something you want, that's fine, but it makes more sense to have a comment, and then comment has some post ID here. For example, instead of a separate table, wouldn't it be better if we have a post ID here, so which post this comment belongs to, right? That's what I'm gonna do. So I'm just gonna say, okay, so don't create a join table, but mapped by, and then I'm gonna be saying map by post. That means, what does this mean? is look at the field called post in comment, right? Comment. And okay, so currently we don't have, so private, and then okay, post, and then post, right? Now, so what we have told this is, okay, look at the post in the comment field. Okay, so it's because we haven't here, okay, comment, and then here we have to associate it. So from this side it's many to many, many, many to one, sorry, many to one, because many comments will be associated with post. And if you click here, it gives us this suggestion, and then if you click here, now it goes back to this field. So that means now what we have told is comment will map. So this means comment will have something from post. So basically it's post id, because this is the primary key, so it will have post underscore id. And if I create, sorry, if I run this application one more time, this table is going to be dropped and the column will be added right here. Okay, so if you check here, you will see, and now we only have two tables, and then column are four, and then post id, right? This makes more sense to me, so I can actually fetch all the comments from this post, right? And then I can also navigate to post from this comment, right? All right, so there is a basically you have post, so comment dot post will lead you to the post, and then post dot comments will lead you to the comments. All right, so that's pretty much set, and we are actually now ready to write some logic for API development. So this setup has been completed, and then we will come back and adjust if anything needs to be changed. So one more thing here, since post has one to many relationship by default, when you fetch it's eager. So eager means okay, don't, sorry, by default it's lazy. For example, it says don't fetch comments when you fetch post, right? That makes sense because one post can have like thousands, even millions of comments in a very famous post, right? So here, so we can just say fetch equals fetch type, and then dot lazy. That means even though it's default, it is better to specify here. So you are basically saying, okay, please don't fetch comments when you are fetching post, right? We will fetch comments separately. That's the best strategy. If your application has, let's say, on an average 10, 15 comments, that's fine to fetch. It will be not a problem. But if your application can have like thousands of comments, now, so what we can do is create, start creating API. All right. So, and we'll be writing API code here, right here in controller. And so we'll be creating a couple of APIs, and then we'll be testing with the help of Postman. All right. So for this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to be creating controller class. For example, first we'll be dealing with post, because without post we cannot have a comment. So I'm going to be naming it as post controller. All right, so to make this controller, what I'm going to do is I'm have to say it's a REST controller. That means, okay, it's a controller that will expose API to the application. And then we can also give request mapping. And then here we can give something like API and then B1 and then slash posts, right? So this is like a convention. For example, B1 means version 1. So for example, sometimes you have to maintain different versions, but some people just write like this is fine. I will be including this, and then B1. And instead of writing B1, so before Spring Boot 4 we used to write like that, but now we can just say version, and then here version equals, and then B1. So this means this version B1 will be actually will be replacing this person. So it is essentially saying APY AP1 B1 post, right? But for that to be enabled, we have to make a small change in our application.ml file, right? So okay, let me write this, but we will change that a bit later. I will show you whether it works or not. Okay, so let's see, and then get mapping. So get mapping is essentially for getting resources from the database or from the application. You can use any mapping, but you have to make sure, because you have to realize that these exist for a reason. So you have to use the correct resource mapping, right? You cannot just say post mapping and return data. That's not a good practice. They exist for some reason. Get mapping and then public and then string and then data and then return, and let's say data. And if I run this application, and if I go to, okay, API version is specified, but all right, so it already gives us the configuration error, and this is where we have to actually change a little bit of setting. In fact, add some configuration, right? So it is MVC. Oh, it should be here. Okay, MVC, and then API version, and then use path segment and then one. So this is basically index one base index. So right now we are saying this is one best index, right? So what we are saying is this one is the version. So if I run this now, application should run. All right, and let me test this. So how do I test this? API b1 and post, for example, API b1 and post, and then I'll be doing something like API v1 post and localhost 8080. So if we go to here and then HTTP, for example, post API v1, oh, it is post, and then same thing, gate, and let me run this application. It should return data, right? So we have actually created our very first REST API with git mapping, right? But this is not something that we are interested in creating. So now what we want is we want to return the list of the posts in our application, right? So what I'm gonna do is, first of all, this is not enough. For example, we are not going to return the string, we have to return list of something. So response entity, it's for like some response status, and then the body in proper format, and then the list of, and then maybe I will create a DTO, right? So why create DTO if we already have a post is because, sometimes there are some sensitive fields, and also if you return post, you have comments, and then the comment has post, so you will go to circular reference. So you have to create like some field that you want from these fields, right? Maybe we don't need comments, we don't in fact need comments, right? So I'll be including those fields here. So it is, in fact, I'm going to be using record, and then post DTO record, and then it will have long ID, and then what else it will have? ID title description, ID title description, and then okay, and comment, I don't need it. All right, so the ID gave me some suggestion, and then you just use that. All right, now so what I have told here is just like a DTO that I will be passing here and will be returning. So this is immutable, and it's extremely useful for DTO, right? So instead of using plain Java, we can use this record, and it will be easier for us to write code. All right, so here now what I've said is post DTO, it will be returning post DTO. For now, just I'll return null. Okay, So, but before that, we have to create a service. Service is for business logic, right? And then we'll be creating data access layer or data access object for interacting with the database. So that's what I'm gonna do next. So I'm going to create a service. And so before I create a class for actual business logic, so I'll be defining an interface. So interface are usually good for when you have, let's say, a r- like multiple classes implementing same. Here you can directly go for class and implement direct methods, but I will be sticking with interface. It's a good design practice. So I, and then for interface, I mean, you can just say post service, post service, and but I'll be starting with I, so that it's easier for us to understand. I, and then post service, and boom. So this is interface. And so here we will be declaring methods, right? So we're not going to be implementing because we cannot implement. We do have default and static, but we usually don't write that here. Okay, so what I'm going to say is public, even though it's redundant, because by default the methods in interfaces are public. I'm gonna be saying the list of post DTO. Okay, it will be returning the list of the post DTO, get all, and then post. Okay, all right, and then I'll also be writing one more method. So okay, not list of DTO, but post DTO. When we create a post, create post. Okay, and then it will be taking post. All right, so we'll first implement this, but this is for, like, when we want to create a post. So I'll be showing you how to get all posts first, and then we'll be creating post. All right, so here, and this is interface, but I need to implement this interface, right? So first I'll write some package called impl. So this is a sub package inside of service. And then here I'll be writing a class that implements this post service. So post service, right? So look at this, I'm just writing post service. Otherwise, if you hadn't written I here, you could have written like this. Some many people like write like this. I'll be just sticking with this one, right? So it's easier for us to distinguish, but you can go with either way. There is no hard rule about it. Okay, so this is a service, and then what I'm going to do is, this is a service, right? So that we get some transactional features by default. So if you include here, it is created as a bean, like a spring banished bean, and also we get transactional features. All right, even though we will not be using a lot of transaction here, we'll be sending to database. But if you have multiple layers and transactional, I will show you some of the examples. All right, and here, and then we have to implement, and then that's I post service, right? That interface, and then it will give us some error. And then if you go here and then select, basically we are doing this. All right, but here, instead of returning this, we need to return data. And how do we interact with data? So you don't usually talk to database right from here, because we have a separation of concern. So instead of doing that, we'll be using JPA for interacting to database, and then we'll be injecting JPA right here, and then we'll be returning data to the controller. All right, so I'm going to go inside repository, and here I'll be creating interface again. So JPA is an interface. um, so what I'm gonna do here is, and then post, and then repository, or sorry, yeah, and then extends JPA repository. All right, and then what is the type of the class that we are going to manage? Post, and then the primary key is ID. So this is the post that the JPA will be managing. So basically for this, and then this is the primary key, right? We have long, And that's all actually. And we get a lot of methods for free. If you go here, JPA repository, and then for example CRUD repository, you will get find all, save all, find all by ID, and then certain methods like get by ID, find all. These methods for free, you don't even need to write. All right, so I'm going back, and here what I'm going to do is I'm just going to write that field private final post repository, and then post repository. All right, so it says you haven't actually initialized, so that means I'll be using a constructor to inject. So basically now we have used constructor injection. All right, so this is called constructor injection. So basically I'm auto wiring this post repository here, right? And then I will be using this post repository feature. All right, so get all post. What I'm gonna do, basically what I'm gonna do is I'll be post a repository dot find all. Find all, that means it will return everything. So for example in production application you are not going to return everything, right? You are going to be using pagination, whether offset based or cursor based. But here it's perfectly fine because it will take a lot of time to implement pagination because we have so many features to implement. And then I'll be just alt enter, it will return the list of the posts. All right, and since we are not going to return post directly, we have to map back to list of the post DTO. So what I'm going to do is post DTO, and then post DTOs, and then equals to new array list. And okay, post dot for each, and then you get post. Okay, and then here, so what are you gonna do is post DTO, sorry, DTO equals new post. Do we have post DTO? Yeah, we have post DTO, right? Since we have post DTO here, ID, title, description, and created at. So ID post dot get ID, and then post dot get title, and then post dot get content. Oh no, get, okay, sorry, post dot description, not content. Description, des, get description, and what else? Description and created, I guess. Post dot get created did. All right, and then I'm gonna be adding to post DTOs, post DTOs dot add, and then this DTO, right? So you can directly do this inside of this, but this will be more maintainable. And then return the post DTOs, okay? Post DTOs, all right? So I'm going to be returning here, okay? All right, so now we have actually successfully returned talk to database and then return here. Okay, so we need to use this repository, right? So the one thing if you have noticed is I haven't added anything like repository, so which is perfectly fine. But if you want to be explicit, you can just add it. Otherwise, it will be automatically recognized. If you, as long as you extend a JP repository, it is going to be recognized. All right, so I have to go back to controller, and here the same thing, I'm going to be injecting dependency. So private final post, and then service, this time service. So, and see, the one thing that I wanted to tell you is, we have I post service. If you write service here, it's not going to work. All right, so you have to write a service in a class that implements this interface. All right, so that's the important thing to keep in mind. So I'm going to inject post service here, and since this field is not initialized, I need to add to constructor. And look at this, now we have successfully injected. So you can also write auto wired, but all right, sorry, auto wired, but it is not required if you just have one constructor. All right, and here So there are multiple ways. For example, when you are returning, you can return something like for example, a response and then entity dot okay, and then here the body. So the body is going to be post service dot get all posts, right? And then this result will be here, and then all posts. Okay, return. All right, so this is fine. This is one of the ways. It is saying okay. That means, it is saying as 200 status. And or you can also return like this. For example, you can also response entity dot status and then http status dot okay, right? And then you can do like this and body and then just all posts. Okay, you can do like that if you want. Otherwise you can just do like this. Okay, so I'll be sticking with the first one, and then I'll be moving here. So in case you want some reference, that's fine. All right, so if I run this application now, so since I have actually configured, you don't need to write anything here. You can just write like this. That's fine. If something, usually in REST API, you don't write something like this all. Some people write it, that's fine. But if you write this resource and with the correct mapping, that means even you without writing explicitly something here, so it will be understood, right? So you can just leave it like this or just like this, right? That's fine. And I'll run this application first, and we will hit this endpoint. So it's going to be localhost API v1 and then post from this postman. Of course we will not have any data because we haven't added any data, but let me hit this and look at this. Now we get the empty list, which is as expected, right? Because we haven't added any data to the database. All right, so we have successfully created our first API, so which is really nice. So we have done like status and everything in a n layer architecture way, right? So this is pretty nice and this is pretty organized. Now it's time to create another API for creating post, so that we can send data to database and then retrieve with the help of this API. Let's do that. All right, so let's continue writing another endpoint. So for this one, I'll be writing post mapping because we are adding data to the database. So it's going to be post mapping. And if you want to add something like this, for example create, but I usually don't, because if it is post mapping, it is automatically understood that it is going to write data to database, right? So these are going to be two different endpoints because the type is different. Okay, and so what I'm going to do is public response entity, and since I'll be like returning the created post, what I'm gonna say is just post DDO, not the list of the post, and create. Oh, it should have been get all. So meaningful name, get all post. All right, here. Sorry about that. And then create post. And so create post is a little bit different. So I'm just writing on for now. Create post is different, right? So we were just returning data, there was no argument, but when we are creating post, we actually receiving some payload, right? So for example in this case post, so what we have to do is we have to say okay, I'll be receiving post is a request. Okay, so this is going to be request, and then I have to say, otherwise it's not going to be recognized automatically, a request and then body. All right, so what I'm saying is okay, this is the payload. Okay, so here we'll be adding logic. I mean, so for example as of now maybe we can just return that, return a response entity, response entity dot okay, and then what is the body? Body is post service dot create post and then request and just body. You can directly copy this and write it inside of this, but that will be hard to debug if some issue occurs. So I'll be just sticking with this. Okay, here, it's okay, but here, maybe, it is better to go for something different. Dot status, since it's going to be created, it is better to write proper status dot created, since we created a resource in the database. So it's going to be better. And then dot body and then just post. Okay, so you can say created post or something like that, but that's fine. All right, so now we have successfully written, but this logic is missing. And so for this logic, it is pretty simple. What we are going to do is post repository dot save. Even the IDE is giving me suggestion, and this is absolutely correct. So I'll be just hitting tab, and then here it's giving me suggestion, but I'll be, oh, it's already gave me. Okay, I'll be saving some time here, that's fine. So here, new post DTO saved post.get id, because in post DTO it's the same. So you can just copy this and include here. All right, so this is creating post and this has been implemented right here. Okay, so if I go and run the application now, we'll be able to save the data to the database. All right, and so, look at this. Every time this is creating tables and comments and, executing queries. So we're not going to do that now anymore, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to turn off that setting. So initially it's fine, for testing it's also fine. There are certain options. Maybe we will do none. All right, so that means, if you add column, you have to manually add it. This is what is going to happen in production. In production, you are not going to just randomly let, JPA or Hibernate add columns to your table, so it will not be. So we'll be using flyway migration later. So I'll show you when you add a column, how can you write migration script using flyway migration tool. All right, so basically we'll be writing, but handling will be done by flyway. I'll show you later. And now if I run this application one more time, you will not see any such queries here. Okay, and look at this. Now these queries are turned off because it has been disabled. All right, and I'll go here and then create post. You have to switch back to create post. You have to switch back to, for example, if you go to get, oh, why get none. Okay, what is happening? Post does not exist. Okay, update for now. Okay, let me uh okay, what happened actually? Let me run this one more time. This is good. And then update none. Let me see. We should have post table here. It should not be deleted. Okay, so yeah, we have posts and we also have tables. And then if I, all right, yeah, that's fine. Now it's fine. It's working. Get, and then post inside of body here raw. So title, content, it's description, not content. We don't have any author. So what we have here, post title, this id will be automatically managed, so we don't need to pass this as a payload, title and description. And again, created, we are not going to do because it has now been saved automatically. We don't need to pass. And comments also, we are not going to pass comments directly when we create post, right? Because the post is usually created, so description. And if I run this, look at this, we created our first post with title this. Oh, it's a second content. And okay, mismatch, but that's fine. First, and if I run this again, now we have two. And if I go to get and then get this, we have two posts, right? Good job. So we have created posts, and then look at this, we have only faced the posts, not the comments. So if we ever want to face something like comments, we will be appending here. So when you return, for example, in post controller, post service, so you can always do something like, when you create a DTO, and then you will just do saved post comments, get comments, and then we'll be appending it to the original comment and set it here, right? So it all depends, but I'm not gonna face comments when I face the post. All right. Look at this. So we have successfully created, and then the status code is cool. And for a post, and if I create this again, even though it's going to be, it is 201 created, right? That means it was, the resource was created in the database. And if you go and see in the database, for example, and if you go here, do I have console, select star from posts, and look at this, now we have three different posts with this id 123, created date, and all those fields, right? And you can also verify from, for example, slash dt, we have post select star from, and then post. All right, so you can see the same content. So I'll just be closing that because this is enough for me. So now it's time to actually create resources or endpoint for comments, and then associate post and comment. That would be a fun part, so let's do that. All right, so now it's time to write controller for comments. So I'm gonna be writing comments controller, comments, and then maybe comment controller. Okay, and again rest controller, request mapping, API v1, again the same convention. And instead of v1, I'll be writing version. But if you are using Spring Boot version other than 4, just write uh, a different name, like directly v1 here. Okay, so version comments, and then version equals v1. All right, this v1 will replace the version. All right, here, so what we are going to do is first create comments, right? Create comments. So this is going to be post mapping, and then request mapping. No, get mapping. You can directly use get mapping. Sorry, no, post mapping, and then public. And then what it is going to return is, when you create a comment, basically it's going to return a comment, the created comment, right? So response entity of comment. But is it better to return comment, right? Look at this. Since we have comment and then the post, and I mean, we can also always ignore this field with the help of JSON ignore. For example, if you do JSON ignore, it will actually ignore this field from getting populated in the request, right? So that means in the response, sorry, in the data, it will be ignored. That means the JSON ignore annotation, what it does is it ignores this from the actual response. All right, so we can do that, but I believe what we can do is, okay, I'll just comment it out. What I want to do is, instead of comment, I want to create comment DTO, and then return the comment DTO instead. All right, and then create comment, and here, and then again it requests, it receives request body, and then comment, and then comment. All right, here, and then I'm going to be creating this DTO, comment DTO, sorry, it should be record. And what is comment containing? Let me see. Comment has ID, text, date, id, text, id, text, date, and yes, post id, and then long post id. Okay, perfect. And so this is the DTO for us, comment controller. Okay, import class, and we are all set for this. So this is going to receive, for example, creating comments. So this creating comments, and then comments, and then how can we write post id comments? So API b1, and then comments, since this is a comment controller, but we may get something like comments and then post, mm, and then slash post id, maybe that's better. Okay, so that means comments, and then you are going to post, and then the post id. So for post id, please create comment, or you can say please associate this comment to this particular post id. All right, so comment, or we can say request, and then add the path variable, since this is a path variable. So something like this is going to be path variable, and the path variable has to be denoted or referenced by this. And if you want, you can just keep post id, and here you have long id. But if you just want to have post id here, this is absolutely optional, right? So you can now have id. So I'm just showing you the alternative. And here again, it's the same, return null for now, just to make compiler happy. And then what I'm gonna do here is create a repository called comment repository, comment, and then repository, and then extends. Okay, it's interface, and then jpa repository. Okay, and then comment, no, comment, and then long, right? And again, repository is optional, but you can write it. Okay, so now we have actually created comment repository, and then inside of comment controller, we can refer to comment service, which we have had to create. Let me create comment. Actually, it's going to be interface. So I comment service. Okay, this is interface, and then here public, and then comment DTO, and then create, and then comment. And then creating comment actually received two argument, right? So you know that comment, and then long post, and then id. All right, and this is good. And inside of this, I'm going to be saying comment service, and then sorry, implements, and then I comment service. All right, and implement methods, and then just hit enter. And then again, you need to write service in the class that actually implements this interface. And here, so what we are going to do is private inject this, private final. What are we going to inject here? You already know, comment repository, right? Because that talks to database. And okay, and alt insert, and then constructor. All right, so we have now auto wired this repository in this comment service class, so we can talk to database. Okay, and comment repository dot find Oh, no, no, it's save, not find, not save all, save, only save, and then comment. All right. But before that, what we are going to do is post service. We also have to first check if that post ID actually exists, right? So even though when someone clicks from the link, it usually exists, that's why it's in the UI, but someone might try to break the application. Now that's why we have to, and then post repository. Okay. Or you can write a method that returns whether it exists or not in the post service. For example, you can go to post service and then write the method there. But I just want to check with the help of post repository, right? So we have to add this as a constructor parameter. That's fine. And here, post repository dot, or maybe, so instead of find by id, right, we can do something like exists. Okay, exists by id, because it only checks if it exists. We don't need to actually the result of the find by or something, right? We just want to check if that actually exists. So this is more efficient as compared to find by id. Find by id is useful when we want that result. Exist by id, post id. Okay, boolean exists by id, or you can just say exists. So if not exists, just throw new runtime exception, and then post with id, and then post id, and then not found in the db. Okay, so that means it is not found, otherwise it's found. So that means, oh, okay. So here, actually, it makes sense to have a post retrieved. So I'm gonna be actually using find by ID, right? Because I have to associate comment in post. Sorry about that, but if you don't need the result, you can always go with that. Oh, sorry. All right. Introduce local variable. Oh no, it's find by ID. Local variable, it's optional. Post by id, and by id dot is empty. So that means if it is empty, just throw new exception. Otherwise, this comment dot set post, and then by id dot get. So this is the, actually this get returns the post, and I'm going to be associating that post to this comment, and then save, and saved, and then saved comment. You can say saved comment. And like now I'm going to be returning comment dto, not comment itself. So I have to do comment dto. So saved comment dot get id, comment text. Okay, perfect. Let's see if it is working or not. All right, and I don't think we need to access it again, because when we do this, it actually calls. So maybe we can just post ID, directly past post ID, because they are essentially the same. Comment DTO, and I don't need actually to store. I can just return it. Comment DTO ID text, commented date, and then post id. Okay, I'll just add just a little bit here and take it there. Okay, perfect. So now create comment, it has not been called yet. So I'll go to comment controller, and just inject private final comment service. It's comment service, not I comment service, comment service. And just do alt insert, and this is done. Return. You can also, keep something like response status right here, and then http status, um not accepted, created. Okay, you can always keep like that. It's other way. And then response, and then status the okay, and then body is going to be a comment service, something like that. Okay, not okay, but body. All right, so response entity, response, and then entity dot okay. Again right here, it's so annoying sometimes. All right, now what I have done is response entity dot okay, and directly pass the result here. Okay, that's fine. And let me run this application, and then test we will test that in the Postman. All right, so in the Postman API version comments and post, create comment, it's compilation fine, comments, and then post, and then post ID is going to be 1, and then the get type is, sorry, the method is post type. And here, so what is the, we have to pass, let me see. We are going to be passing API person, so API b1 comments, and then not post, it's post, and then 1, for example post ID. Okay, and then this is post mapping, and path variable is set, and as a body I will be writing comment text, that's fine. ID not required, commented it also not required, post is also not required. All right, so it's just the comment and the post ID, so it should work actually. Let's see if it works. Wow, this works. And now we have got ID, actually comment text, this is the comment text for post 1, and then commented date, this is the date with time zone, and this is actually associated with this particular post, right? So this is post ID. The interesting thing is, if we go to the database and then see the result, okay, I'll write console. So actually post here we have 3, but if I duplicate and then get comments here, this is interesting to see. Now we have ID and also the post ID, and if I create it again, post 1, and look at this, and if I rephrase here, this is actually getting these 2 comments for this particular post, right? So one more time, maybe we can write, we can always do delete and things like that, but I'm not going to write a lot of endpoints because it's just repetitive. But maybe we can just get, I want to show you one more thing for writing custom queries. That's why I will be implementing one API specifically for retrieving all the comments related to post, right? So I'll be going here, and this is for comment controller receiving, but now I'm going to be receiving get mapping, and then in get mapping comments, and then, so for example post ID, maybe post ID. Okay, or instead of writing here, I'll be writing in post controller, because the I will be returning post related to, sorry, comment related to a post, so it is going to make more sense. So instead of posts, and then slash, let's say post ID, and then slash comments, right? This makes more sense because now I'm referring to post ID and then comments. and then public, and then a response entity of, since it is going to return the comment, so list of comment DTO, and then get all comments for post and long post ID. Okay, so here, and since this is post ID, I have to say it's a path variable. All right, so I'm just gonna post ID, so you don't need to write here the name. Get all comments per post, and then we'll be returning that. So for now I will just return null to make compiler happy. But since we are actually receiving something comments per post, what I can do is I can go to post service, and then in iPost service I can write get, so public, and then list of comment DTO, get comments per post, and then long post ID. Okay, and get comments per post and post ID, and then right here, so here what I'm going to do is, this is going to be coming from comment repository, so this is going to come from comment repository. Or maybe I could have written in comment service but use that in post controller. That could have made more sense. Okay, yeah, I think I'll do that because I'll be dealing with comment repository, so it doesn't make sense to write here in post service. Okay, so I'll just be moving that. Okay, so just moving that from, sorry about that, and in comment service, and here, so it's going to be related service, and okay, and here in comment service. All right, so now it is good. So what I'm going to do here is, first of all, of course it's going to be the same if there is a post. If there is a post, that's fine. Otherwise, it doesn't exist, just throw an error. Otherwise, what I'm going to do is comment repository dot find all by, and then if you do find all by post and past post, that actually returns the result, right? But this was not something that I wanted. I'm not gonna test this, but if you pass here by ID, it should work actually, because it should work by ID. Actually, it should work. But what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna show you how to write query on your one. Comment repository dot find all comments, and then by post. Okay, and then post ID. All right, so in this case, okay, here, so post, so in this case, like I was talking about the post exist by, so in this case exist by ID actually makes more sense because we are not concerned about the data. We just want to verify whether that exists in database. Exists by ID, and here exists by ID. Okay, exists by ID. Now, the the work remaining for us is to write this method in the repository. Post ID. All right, and I'll just leave this here for reference. Comment repository dot find all comments by post, or you can say post ID. That's fine, either is fine. It's a custom method because it's not like a JPA method, so we have to write on our one, and it's comment repository. So comment repository, comment repository, and so we are going to list of comment, right? Yeah, this is the one that we have to write here. So we have to write a custom query here. Okay, so but before that, what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna restore the result. Okay, so comments, I'm just gonna say comments, that's fine. And since we have, actually we have to map it to comment DTO, so what we have to do is comments dot for each, and then comment, and I'm gonna map it to comment DTO. And look at this, so it is going to be comment actually. Okay, comment DTO, oh sorry, DTO equals to new comment DTO. uh it's not giving me suggestion. I don't want it to type it. Okay, so I'm gonna type the get ID, and so comment it. All right, right now it gives me some suggestion. All right, and all right, so now we have got, the comment DTO, and then we also need to actually create the list of comment DTO array list, sorry, comment DTOs equals new array list, and just add that DTO comment DTOs dot add this DTO. Okay, and DTO, and what we are going to do is return comment DTOs. Okay, so this is how we actually return the result. The only thing that remaining is we have to actually write this query. So let's write this query. All right, so even though this looks like it works because we have a correct pattern, find all comments by post ID, and we have correct mapping. I'm not going to test it, but what I wanted to show you is how to write some custom queries using ZPAs, right? So specifically, if you have joins, you have to write custom queries like ZPQL, so Java Persistent Query Language. And to write that, so it is called ZPQL. And so what I'm going to say is okay with query. So what I'm going to say is give me data for this post id and all the comments. Okay, so what I'm going to say is, you can write, so select, and then you can just refer this as C from, and then the field name. So actually here, since you are not gonna write native SQL queries or SQL queries, you have to refer to the model class, right? So that's why it is APQL. I mean, you can write, so from comment, C comment, and what you are gonna do is from comment and then alias C. It's giving me annoying. And then where, so since this C has post dot id equals to, and then this id equals to something like post id, and then this post id will be dynamically passed. And then if you want some order, let's say order, and then order, why order, order, order by, order by, and for example c dot commented date, and then the order, for example descending. Okay, so this is the query. So this is basically like a plain SQL queries. For example, if you go here and write a basic SQL query, so select star from comments, so select c from comments, c where c dot star comments, c where c dot post id equals to 1, right? It will give you all the comments related to this post id. Okay, so this will give you in some like this format, but if you do start in SQL, it will give the result in this proper format, right? So that's what we are doing here. So we are just doing the same thing, and again I forgot order by a query there. For example, here order by created create oh commented date descending, and it may change the order to 1. Look at this, right? So that's what we want. And let me go back, comment repository. Okay, and there we go. Select C from comment C, where c.post.id, look at this, it's like a, referencing the field of the comment is equal to post id, and we are going to order by comment date in descending fashion. All right, so that means the latest will come first. And here, so but we haven't instructed, the Hibernate doesn't understand what is this post id is, so we have to say with the help of @param, and then here just pass this post id, and then this long post id. That means this post id will now be binded to this post id we pass. Okay, if I go here, now this post ID is actually going to be this post ID. All right, so if I run this application, let me go, if we have completed all of the concepts, comments, okay, so comments for post, and it is in post controller, not comment controller. Let me go post controller, and so since post service, post, and then service dot get all post, create post, is it in the post service, create post, get all post? No, it's in the comment service actually, so we have to inject comment service here. Private final comment service, comment service, comment service, comment service dot okay, or is, oh no, comment service, I will be dot get comments for post, and then post id, and then I'll be getting the result comments per post, that's fine. And response entity dot status okay, yes it's okay, and then body. All right, so I'm just going to use that IDE feature, and there we go. So we have actually successfully created this endpoint with custom query. And sometimes if you want to write some queries like a native queries, for example, without referring to entity class, you may want to write, and that case you have to write native query equals to true. But in this case it's going to fail because it doesn't understand these things. Okay, it doesn't understand these comments, so it should be comments, right? And then it understands. So but like for example, if your query was like this, here it doesn't make sense. But if your query was like, let's say something like, oh no, something like select star from comments, select star from comments, and then native query equals true, it could have worked. Right now it says the select star from, just like this console query. So this is how you write a native query, but here it, for example, you could have written this exact query. Where is that console? Here, this exact query right here, comment repository. Okay. mm, okay, like this, and then you can just remove this, and maybe you select star from comments, c dot c dot star, maybe it works. But yeah, it will be something like this, right? I'm not gonna write this, I'm not gonna test it just to save some time. But if you were to write something like that, you can always try it that way. So let me run this application now. I'll be running application. We have successfully integrated that to controller. Okay, looks good. Let me go to post controller. Post controller, and in post controller, so we have posts and then post id and comments. Okay, in the post controller, so we are going to be creating a new request. I'm going to be creating like a new request. It's getting slow. Post. Okay, post, and then post id, and then comments, right? So it's the exact same endpoint: posts, post id, and comments. This is posts, and then post id and comment. Let me run this. It should return the list of the comments for us. Okay, all right, so something went wrong. Let me see. Post with id not found in the db. Oh really? All right, let me see. No, it actually exists. Did we write some wrong code? Oh, if exists, if not exists. Sorry, that's a blunder. Now it should work. I'm just going here. As soon as application runs, we will actually hit this endpoint. So let me click. All right, look at this. Now we have retrieved two comments associated this post, and we can always display these things in our UI, or like JavaScript or other frameworks. So this is working as expected, and we are getting some logs here about queries, and they have been properly formatted. You can see what query has been executed behind the scenes for us. So that is pretty cool. So we have done a great job. So now your job is to create some more endpoint for a post related to comment. I mean, you can delete the comment, for example. And for the post, for example, if you remove delete the post, let me show you one of the things. For example, deleting post. What I can do is post deleting. Maybe that's interesting to see, because it also deletes delete mapping. If you want to delete mapping, and response status is http status dot no content, right? We are not going to return any content. And then public void, and then delete, and then post, and at the rate path variable, and delete mapping. And I'm just gonna pass, and then slash post id, because we need post id, and then long post id. All right, and then post service dot delete. All right, okay, post service. Let me go to post service here, and then delete, and then post, and post id. All right, and I'll create delete post right from here. And I post service, this is fine. And if you go here, and then also accept this, okay, here, and post repository dot delete by id, post id. Okay, perfect. So you can just delete this, and let's see if it works as expected. So I'm gonna be like deleting post one, or maybe I'll create. Okay, we will go delete post one. If it works, it will work. All right, so now what I'm gonna do is, instead of creating post here, For example, maybe I can create post, and then this is going to be, we have another post pour. And so if I delete this post and then delete, for example, if I delete maybe, you know, 3, it works, no content. But since it did not have comments, I want to taste for which one has comments. I think it's the one which has comments. Let me see. Okay, one has comments, so post one should be deleted, and then also these comments should be deleted. So if that logic is correctly implemented, because of cascade all, it should delete, otherwise we will fix it. Okay, for not found. Okay, no, delete and then one. So we are basically deleting post one, delete mapping. So actually we don't need any payload. And then let me delete this. And actually it is deleted with no content. That's fine. But is it deleted? Look at this. This is because of the cascade all. Now we deleted post, and post with id one should also not exist, right? So to put, and also these comments are actually deleted. That means our strategy that we set up before, so like this, for example, this cascade all is actually working, and these things are also working, and it's really excited. Actually, I've learned a lot of things about REST API designing and implementing, and also with best practices. So we've done a great job. Now you can add more API endpoints and play around with. So we'll be going to next section. All right, guys. So we've done a lot of changes here in this application. We have developed REST APIs, but I wanted to show you something production setting, production related things, right? It's fine for tutorial not to include that. So how would you migrate database? Let's say, since now our application actually doesn't create or modify columns when we start the application, right? So in real-time application, what you are going to do is write migration script. Let's say, I wanted to add author field here, private final, and then no, not final, just a string and author, right? I wanted to add that as a column, author name, for example. All right, so what am I going to do is, when I run the application, it's not going to actually create this. Okay, let me run this. The application has started, and if I go here and refresh, okay, and then if you go here, there is no author column. I want to add, and I have to manually add this column, right? So what Flyway does is, it's basically like a migration tool. It maintains its own history and versioning is trial, and it keeps some convention for us to write. So basically what we have to do is we have to actually write a flyway migration with certain convention. So for these resources, what we are going to do is, for including flyway, I have to write a specific directory, db, and then, for example, inside of the db, what I'm going to do is write migration, right? Migration, so db, and then here migration, and inside of this migration I have to write SQL queries, and it has certain convention, for example. But before that, I need to add dependency for that. So let's head over to flyware documentation, and we will find flyware dependency for Postgres. All right, so if you head over to this and copy this and just paste it to here, pom.xml. Okay, so here, okay, I'm just copying it, refreshing it. And we need to specify certain settings for flyware in our application.ml file. I hope it is going to be resolved. It is not. Okay, let me see. It doesn't resolve. hmm It should actually resolve. Let me try. hmm Okay, and let me go here, add flyware. If we have to add something else, oh yeah, flyware looks like for flyware there is another one more dependency to add. Okay, let me copy this and add that as well. Okay, I will rephrase and hopefully it works now. I'm not sure if it is working or not. Let me try with Maven. So basically, sometimes the IDE has problem. So Maven clean. Just do Maven clean. All right. So this is missing. That means it is not getting downloaded. I'll just comment this out. I'm not sure if this alone is sufficient, right? So I was just checking the documentation. Let's see. Oh no, not here. Maven clean install. The Maven clean install does the clean and repackage it. Okay, looks like it works. All right, no, it does not. Okay. Oh my gosh, I'm making a lot of mistakes here. Ls. Um. So it is not working because build failure. What is that? Unsupported database. Okay, so unsupported database Postgres 17.5. Interesting. Flyware initializer. Okay, so first of all, let me do some configuration in application.ml and we'll see if that actually works. Okay, all right, let's go here and write some configuration. So I'll be just copying some of the configuration here. Okay, so right here, flyway enable true, and the path is going to be this migration, right? So this is something that we defined. And if I run this now, I'm not sure if it's going to work. Oh, it does not. So unsupported database Postgres SQL 17.5. So looks like it doesn't support Postgres. So select and then version. Yeah, it's 17.5. It doesn't support 17.5. I'm not sure if it needs to be upgraded or downgraded. So let me quickly inspect it. All right, guys. So there was a slight mismatch in dependency. So I replaced with this org.flyway, not the one that I copied before. And looks like it now works. At least the application is running. So now let's write a simple query to add some column to the database, right? So what I'm gonna do here is inside of DB migration, I have to write some convention. So for example, it has to be a SQL file. So I think if I go here and then write flyway migration something, flyway migration, okay, it's going to Okay, so maybe I'm just going to write it on my one if this tool is not available for you guys. It's just like a SQL file. Callback, callback event. Oh no, here it's a simple file. And then, so the when you are writing something in flyware, you have to write something like this: b1 underscore underscore. So it's like a versioning. So you have to write this with b. If you want to write something that always runs, this is going to be r, right? So the r means recursive, so always run, not recursive but always runs regularly. But if you want to just write something that does not have to be run more than once, so you have to do b1. This is just like for versioning, ordering, and then the next query will be b2, b3, and then if you have like multiple b1 dot something, you can do b1 dot 1. But you must make sure that it is always 2 underscore after this version. All right, and then the name, for example, create and author table, sorry, not table, column dot sql. All right, so this is a sql file, b1 create author column dot sql. And then here you can write a query, right? So what is the type of the author? So in post it is author. Okay, so we have to write a query here. So alter, and then table posts, add column, and then author, and then varchar 255. Okay, so this is basically, so for example, if I do this in query console, and then if I go here, if I select post, it has nothing. There is no such field called author. And if I just create it, it is now created, and there is a field called author. So but I'm gonna drop column, alter table posts, drop column, and then author. Okay, I'm just gonna delete this author, and I'll be just using flyware for that, right? So just make sure that it will be coming from flyware. All right, so now I have created this, and again I told you, if you wanted to execute something, for example, sql b no r underscore underscore select, and then data, and then from posts, right? And then this is test, only test. So here, if you wanted to select something from posts, you can always write that, and it is always going to be executed. And if I run this application now, so we should see author column in the post table, and we must see that, otherwise the flyway is not working. All right, let's see. Okay, here, look at this. Post created date description, I'm not sure. Okay, and so if you see here something like migration script with migration, select data from post test, and other one, maybe we can see something like that in the console. um Spring in view mode, I don't know, fly away, we can see something here. Flyway executor successfully validated 3 migrations, current version of schema public 1 migrating. Let's see if we have received that column. Okay, post. All right, so it's not working, somehow there is an error. Okay, so the second one is actually executed, but the first one looks like is not executing. All right, everyone. So now what I wanted to show you is, when you refresh this, you will see flyway schema history table, and this is where flyway actually tracks all the executed scripts, right? So I actually selected like everything from here, and then I was able to see that version 1 was already applied, right? So it's a baseline. That's why we have to start maybe from 2, and then I'm going to refactor it, and then instead of 1 I'm writing 2, and then if I run, now it will actually apply this. So let's see in the console if we can see something like that. Application. Okay. No, I don't see it on the console, but let's see. And yes, now create author column. This is now applied. Look at this, how it maintains. And then now, since we have already applied this, even if you run this application one more time, it's not going to be executed because it's not like R. So R is always going to be executed. But now if you go here in the post and then see, look at this. Right now if you want to populate some data to author for some reason, in for some missing field, you can also write the b3 insert data, and then this flyway we so if you want to write something else like some values in author field, right, you can always write another query here, and then this flyway will actually work and then execute the queries, and then it will actually maintain in this history, right? So the benefit of this is, it actually tracks, so it's pretty reliable, and then you don't need to check. For example, if you are checking, for example, let's say create table abc, right, and then you accidentally run this and the table already exists, you have to check create table if not exists abc, something like that, right? But with flyway you don't need to worry about that, right? So it's best to use flyway specifically in production setting, right? Because it now creates this table called flyway schema history, and then it tracks here, right, in the database that you chose, right? So good job, now you have understood how to write flyway migration. Let's go ahead and write something else. All right, guys, so at the beginning I was talking about implementing cache, right? So at this point, if you go and print this getting all post from the db, run this application, hit this endpoint, and then you will see like this printed as many times as you hit this request, right? So wouldn't it be better if we can cache these records if they haven't changed? All right, so I just want to show you like a small demo. So for example, what I want is, when this endpoint is hit multiple times and when the contents haven't changed, it would be nice to return that data immediately from the cache, right? Because database calls are expensive, especially if your application is really large and serving large number of requests, right? So for that, what we can do is we can go here and just enable caching. Okay, so enable caching, and then here we need to configure something. So for example, package, and then config. In config, so what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna create a cache config. So cache config, and then this is going to be configuration, and so it will be automatically managed by Spring. And then at the rate bean, I'm gonna be creating a bean of type cache manager. Okay, so this is something that Spring will look for, cache and then manager. Okay, and then cache manager, and then return new concurrent concurrent map cache manager, concurrent map cache manager. And then for cache names, you can see here the cache names. It is a bar arg, so you can pass as many cache name as you want. So for example, I'm gonna pass post here, right? For example, if you also want to like have it for comments, you can write this right here, right? So that it recognizes. So if I go to comment service or maybe post service, and then here right here cast able, it has like a lot of options. You have to choose this, right? Otherwise they will differ in the syntax. So just carefully import this cast able, and then so value equals to posts. Okay, so you can give other settings as well. If you click here and then go, for example, you have cast names, value, key generator, key, unless, for example, unless, so unless size is something, you can always keep more values here. For example, key, you can define this key, and then you can also define, for example, unless, so cast and return unless size is 0. You can also add that, right? So it all depends actually on how you want to achieve caching. But let me show you. If I run this application now and then try to hit this endpoint, get all posts, in the first attempt it will actually return that from the application, and in the second attempt it is not going to hit that at all. Okay, so let me run this application. So post, I suppose we have hit the database, getting all posts from the database, so that means it is getting called. And now if I delete this, okay, so we got this data way faster if you paid attention. And look at this, now it is not getting displayed, right? So this is not called. That means it the data was actually returned from here. And then you can also, there are certain policies that you have to, for example, when something changes you have to evict cache, otherwise you will be getting, let's say you added one more post, right? So for example, create post. Okay, post, and then here body, and then row. You created post, but now you are getting post. Okay, so you are getting still data, right? Because there are more posts. For example, if you go and look at this, it has 3, but you are getting posts. That means, when you actually add something, you also have to add that to caching, right? So, and or also delete the previous cache and then update it with the new ones, right? You have to be aware of that. So that's the problem of stale data. So if you are serving the data that's not up to date, it's not going to be a good experience. So we are not going to do that here, but just keep in mind and play around with that if you want to. All right, everyone, so I was also talking about some asynchronous execution. So for example, let's say I wanted to send an email to the creator after the after the post was, let's say, published or something like that, right? Just to mimic some asynchronous operation, you would be sending some email to the user. Send the email, right? Just to notify that your post has been um, published or something like that, right? So send and then email, right? So in order to do that, just annotate your application with enable async. Just write enable async and then send email. And then let me create this send email first here. So you know okay, public, and then void send email. So in real application you will be passing parameters and so on, but I'm just gonna like sending email, and then actually email and then send. Okay, so this is how, and then I'm gonna be like mimicking some timer here, and then thread dot sleep, and then I'm gonna be mimicking for a 3 second, and then r or I can just say threaded sleep and then just throw the exception right from the method. All right. And if I run this application, so what I'm trying is, okay, so I have to aid here as well. Otherwise, I will just do try gets here and gets, and then it should be interrupted exception okay, something like that, right? So here, so I'm sending it and the email sent, just mimicking it. And if I actually run this application, I'll show you one thing before we actually write the exact solution. So let me create this, run this. Application ran and it is sleeping for 3 seconds. And if I run this, okay, it took some time, but I forgot one thing. So if I write async, it's still not gonna work. I will explain and then we will write the exact solution. All right, so if you know why this is not going to work, you are at the right path. All right, so the application has now run, and then I've also added async, and I'm gonna run it. And look at this, it's still taking time, right? So it took 3.85 because it slept for 3 seconds, right? So it should actually work, right? Because I've made asynchronous this event, I mean this method, it should work, right? The If you already know, that's good, but since I'm actually using the same method called here, that means this proxy is actually bypassed. So the Spring just treats this method as a normal method. So I'm not allowed to write here, so I have to write in a different service. All right, so we also saw that behavior before. And then let's say email service, I'm just going to write email service and then service, okay, asynchronous. And then here I'll be injecting email service, I'll be removing this, and private final email service, and just add it to the constructor. And here, instead of send email, email service dot send email. Right now what I'm doing is, this is an asynchronous method. That means our application should immediately return while this is getting executed in the background. And let's say in real life it would be probably like it would be adding to Kafka or RabbitMQ, and then the application would be processing and sending emails separately. That will be a separate service. Here we can also do, like, for example, here we can do prepare email and then send email. Okay, so we can do it here as well. So in the background that will be perfect. So let me run this application. Okay, and then I'm gonna be running here, and if you pay attention it should be pretty quick. I mean, at least quicker than this. All right, there we go. So now the application actually gave response in just 531 milliseconds. That means, we actually, if you come here, you got a response. And look at this, sending email, it's still running in the background. And but we got the output before it actually finished executing in the background, right? So that's the power of asynchronous method. So in the front end, if you want to show something, you will do periodic polling, or some other asynchronous operation. It depends on how you want to implement. But asynchronous operations are really powerful, if especially if they are not directly dependent on the UI. So you cannot make For example, getting post asynchronous, that will not make a lot of sense, but since email can be sent separately in the background and it doesn't need to actually block the main thread, so that's the power of asynchronous operation. All right, at the beginning, I was talking about transaction and transaction propagation strategies. So far, we've been dealing with database, but we are only dealing with one method. For example, here it's a case create post, and then we are sending email. There is another method, but this one is actually asynchronous. So transaction propagation actually works so differently because with asynchronous, because they are actually running on different threads. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be creating another similar method, and then I'll be demonstrating how transaction propagation actually works. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to be annotating this as transactional. And when I say transactional, basically everything inside of this method is going to be atomic operation. Let's say I have another method. So after post gets deleted, I'm going to send another email. Dot send another and then email. All right, and then I'm going to be creating method here, and then I'm also going to annotate this as transactional, right? So this is transactional. That means these two methods are going to be executed in the same transaction as of now, right? Because you might say why, because by default if you don't specify, it is going to be propagation required. That means whatever the transaction, if it doesn't exist, it's going to create the new one. So if you say propagation equals to propagation type dot required, and then if you click on this here required, it says support a current transaction, creates a new one if none exists. All right, so that means whatever the transaction it has will be supported here. This is also the default one. It is same as writing the propagation required. And so that means if some error happens here, if something happens here, let's say through new runtime exception, and then just intentional exception. All right, I'm just gonna throw new exception here, and then here, for example, if you want to throw exception right here, for example, what I'm gonna do is just first of all I will copy this. Okay, sending, it's for a deletion. I'm gonna just say sending another email, and then do, and then another email sent, right? But here what I'm gonna do is if um just for testing, just I'm just gonna throw exception anyway. So, or I'm just gonna say throw new runtime exception, intentional. All right, intentional, this is intentional. And since this is unreachable, so what I'm doing here is basically I'm throwing exception after 2 seconds, right? Then here send another email. Since they are in the same transaction, if I try to delete the post by id, it should not be deleted, because they are in the same transaction because of this required, right? So let me run this application and I'll try deleting one of the posts and see if that gets deleted from the database. All right, select from post where id equals 5. If there is 5, yes, we have 5. Let me try deleting application, sorry, the post with 5, and then change it to delete. Okay, and let me run this application. After this, it said exception, which is fine. But one thing that I wanted to handle here is try catch, surround with try catch. Otherwise, exception actually might not help in propagating transaction, right? So okay, all right. So I'm gonna say e dot get message, not through exception, and I'm gonna rerun this application and let's see the behavior. So delete by post. At this point, we have 5. It should be successful. But since this send another email has some exception here because it throws an exception, it actually should roll back. All right. Now transaction, and if you look at the console, it says transaction silently rollback because it has been marked as a rollback only. And if you go here, okay, it's there because it did not get deleted. And then let me show you one more thing. For example, if you go here, send another email, and in here, instead of writing propagation equals to propagation dot required, what we are going to write is different. So propagation, instead of required, I'm gonna say something like requires new. So basically I'm going to be trying requires new. That means it says create a new transaction and suspend the current transaction. That means if this transaction is getting propagated from here to here, suspend this transaction and creates its one new transaction. So requires new, that means they are now in two different transactions. So even if it gets failed, this post repository delete by id should succeed, right? So may not make sense because you are sending email when the post has not been deleted, but this is just to illustrate these functionalities. And let me run this application. I'm gonna be hitting this deletion request and see. So we will encounter error here from the email service, but post should actually get deleted. All right, after 2 or something, no content. All right, now you noticed I was wrong because they are now in two different transactions, so we have not received any error message, right? So that means it looks like the post got deleted. And there we go, sending another email. It was intentional. This one is getting printed, so this one intentional, right? I'm throwing intentional here. And then if you go to database and look at the post, for example, I deleted 5 and it doesn't exist, right? So that's the idea about different propagation strategies, and this is extremely important, specifically you if you are in need when where you want to save something even if something goes wrong, or delete something even if something goes wrong, and then you don't want to commit anything to the database. So it's really important to understand these transaction strategies, and there are more than these. For example, you have supports, and then you can always go here, download resources, and then read. These documents are really helpful and mandatory. For example, if you don't want to support the transaction and you never want to execute transactionally, you go with neighbor and so on. So you can look at these and study about those things, and you can also try on your one. All right, that was all about transaction propagation strategies. I hope you understood something from this. All right, so now it's time to write unit test cases. We're going to be writing JUnit and Makiro unit test cases. So unit test cases are extremely useful for catching errors. Let's say you wanted to verify that your application a feature or the method that you wrote is working as expected, and also let's say you will make changes in future in your application for sure, and then you want to make sure that nothing has been broken as a part of that feature, and it will be like a safeguard. I'm going to be writing controller unit test case first, and then we'll be writing one of these service methods All right, let's go ahead and go to, let's say, comment controller or post controller, for example, and then maybe we will do it for get all posts. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be right clicking here and then generate, click on this and test, and then post controller test, and then you can see also here setup before, tiered and after, etc. if you want. And you can also select which method you want. For example, I want these to be right, so it's just to save some time. And let's say something here. Okay, I'll be selecting. So basically what this is saying is, before each, this is just to set up something if you have something to be executed before each test, and then after each, that means you want to clean up something after each execution. And then this is the actual get all test. So the naming convention can be different. Many people use it differently. For example, it and then should and then verify, get and then all, and then post. All right, that's all. It should verify. That means this is a positive test, and then you can also write negative test cases. So it all depends on people, right? Just follow whatever your organization is following. So here, since we don't want to load everything, we have to actually annotate this with something. For example, we can do at the rate Spring Boot test. But at this time, this Spring Boot test is usually used for integration testing, where your application actually loads all the Spring beans. But we don't want to load the whole context. We are only concerned about the unit, right? So we are going to be testing get all post, and we are unconcerned about other, like end-to-end flow. So this is where something like extends with Mockito extension we can use. So extend with and then Mockito extension dot class. All right, that means we will not be loading entire Spring context. And here are certain, so for example, I just want to print something, set up, right? So if you want to set up some data here, that's fine. And then I'm gonna say cleaning up, just so that we can see some console. All right. And here, so what am I going to do is I'm going to write some mocks, right? So when I say mock, basically in post controller, for example, if I go here, post controller uses post service and comment service. And then here in get all post, I'm using post service, right? So like I said before, we are not actually going to test this service method, but we are concerned about this post controller method, right? This get all post only. So what we are going to do is we are going to verify whenever we call this is actually working as expected. This is returning result. So we want to mark post service as a mock service. All right, post and then service, post service, and then at the rate mock. All right, so then I'm mocking. That means I'm just like a fake service, right? So I'm not actually using the real service because I'm only concerned about this particular method. All right. And then we can also, since we have to bring the controller under test, that is going to be post controller and then post controller, or like some people name it under test, and then here insect and then mocks. That means this is going to be the controller under test. Under test is going to be annotated with inject marks. So here we have to verify the get all, something like that. So whenever this poster get all post, it will return the list of all posts. So maybe I can set up these here. Okay, so the list of, for example, I'm gonna be copying this list of all posts here, and then all posts, and then posts. Okay, I'll write here. since we are not going to use, and new array list. And then I'm going to be like creating some post dto, and then dto equals to new post dto, and then id is 1, title is title 1. Okay, it's, I guess it's a long, and then description, I'm just gonna say description, and then instant dot now. All right, this one I'm just gonna create a couple of these. For example, I will be creating two. All right, and this is going to be dto2, and then I'm gonna add all posts dot add dto1, and then dto2. I've added these two. So here what I'm gonna say is when, okay, so just import this from Makito when. Okay, um all right, just Makito when. All right, so I'm importing everything from there so that it doesn't complain. So what I'm going to say now is when I say, if you go to this controller, what I'm going to do is when post service get all post is getting called, I'm going to return those fake posts. All right, so when post service dot get all post dot, then return, what I'm going to return all posts. Okay, so now what I just told is when post service the get all post, this one is called, I'm returning just this fake data, right? Because I'm now assuming that our service actually returns as expected, because I'm only testing the controller method. Since we mocked this and returned some dummy data, I'm just gonna call the real method under test dot get all posts. Okay, get all posts, and look at this, all, and then posts, and all right, okay, all under test all posts, and then assert, and then assert equals, okay, assert equals, just import it. Okay, so it's from Jupyter. Assert equals, what I'm gonna say is under all posts dot size, okay, get body dot size is actually 2, or all posts dot size. All right, so what I'm gonna say here is what I just said is this, with this result and this size should be true. And then since we also assert equals, and then http status dot okay, and then actual is also um here under all posts. Or I can also say, for example, instead of this I can say response, because it is proper to say response, and then a response dot get status code. All right, so get status code, that should be valid as well. And then I'm also going to assert, for example, or maybe verify post service and then times and 1, right? So that means the when I called this get all post, I want to make sure that the post service was called once, right? Because it has to delegate. All right. And you can add more assertion here, but it's fine to include actually the only that are important to you. And let me run this. All right, so we got an error here. What it says, times 1 post service. It is saying unfinished verification exception. Example of correct verification, mock verify mock, do something. Okay. All right, mocking method declares a non-public parent class is not supported. So let's see what's the error. All right, I think I missed something here. Get all posts. All right, let's run this one more time. And there we go. So now the test has successfully passed. And then we also got set up and clean up, right? So that makes more sense when we have multiple test methods, but fine with this one, right? So you can add more for, let's say, creation and then also deletion and so on. All right, that was it for this controller, and then we will be writing unit test case for one of the services, maybe the same service method for post service. Let's go ahead and write that. All right, now it's finally time to write unit test case for this post service. I have created a file and this create post. For example, it should, so post should be created successfully, right? So you can write in your one way, but I'm gonna be like, for example, if you go here at this point, this create post is actually using post repository, so we are going to be mocking post repository, mock, and then post repository and post repository. And I've already written extend with, don't forget to do that. And so what is the class under test? It's the inject marks, and class under test is post service. All right, post service. So let's go ahead and see the logic here. So post service, when post repository saved is called, actually I have to return a post. So for that I need to have a constructor for a post, because I have to create a post like a dummy post like we created here, like a DTO. We have to create a post. And if I go to post, okay, let me go to post. We don't have any constructor. We'll be including few important fields like ID, title, description, created date, something like that. All right, so I'm just gonna in first of all, I will be writing a title sorry, ID, title, description, and then created date. That's fine, these are the four. And okay, so it's complaining something. Okay, yeah, because we don't have default constructor. So basically I'm gonna move this. Okay, and we are good. All right, I've created constructor with 1 2 3 4 parameters. And then if I go to here, and then so post, and then post, and post, why, import class post, and then post equals new post, and then id is 1 it's a long. And then if I go here, id is string, maybe it's title and description, title. All right, and then title, and then description, and then what else, instant dot. now, maybe instant dot now. It's so annoying. Dot now. All right, and then I'm gonna be creating this is, let's say, response, and now I'm gonna be mocking the same way that I did before. When, okay, if I go here, Mockito dot, I can import everything. Okay, assertion, let's say Mockito dot star, and then when I say when post repository dot save any, so when anything is called with dot, then return, so what I'm going to return, a response. All right, so I'm going to be returning response, and I can also, now I have to pass the request, for example, a different request, and this is the same request, this is request and this is response. Or I can pass explicitly something like, is this correct? Okay, something like post dot class here. Okay, I can't, I'll just pass any, for example. So whenever this save is called, just return this response. And what I'm going to do now is do the operation. All right, so call it, for example, what is this, post service, or I can say under test, and then under test dot create post, and then I'm gonna pass the request. All right, now what I'm gonna do is assert assert not, all right, assert not null, something like post. So this is request and this is mock and then response, and then this is actual response. Okay, so mock response and this is actual response. Actual response is not null, and then assert and then equals. And so we are gonna say, what we are gonna say is, mock response is actually equal to, um, mock response dot, let's say, uh, get id actual, and then actual response dot get id, actual response dot id actual response. Oh, because it returns a post dto create post, but when I saved a post, okay, I think, let's see, it will work. And assert verify post repository, and then comma, and then times one dot save and then any. All right, let me see if this actually works, because this result create test is something that returns post dto. Let's run this and see if that actually works. All right, we got an error because this dot email service is null. All right, okay, because we have used email service, we also need to mark that email service, and then email service, and then I can also say, email service was actually called. um Maybe that's asynchronous, I'm not sure. Email service and then times 1 send email. Send email, it was actually called. Okay, when I say create post, the send email should be called. Let's see if that works as expected. All right, looks like it worked, and you our test case has successfully passed, right? So this is how we can write unit test cases. Just we need to mock, and whatever the dependencies have been used, we need to mock, because we are otherwise it's going to be null and we cannot actually execute the test cases successfully. And then this is where you verify, and this is mocking. Integration testing is a little bit complex because we are basically going to test the integration of different services, kind of like an end to end. So I'm not going to cover in this tutorial. Hopefully I will cover that in the future tutorials. And we have covered a lot of concept in this video. This was a really long, and if you have watched till here, great job, you've done great. And I hope you and if you really like this video, don't forget to subscribe and give it a thumbs up. Thanks for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one.